Have you ever felt like you're constantly walking on a tightrope, trying to be kind, agreeable and available just so things don't fall apart? You're not even sure when it began, only that somewhere along the way you were taught that being a good person meant staying quiet, pleasing others, and swallowing your truth for the sake of harmony. But what if that idea, this moral script you followed your whole life, isn't wisdom, but conditioning? The Stoics taught that virtue is strength, not submission, that true goodness doesn't require you to be stepped on. In this video, we'll go deeper into the subtle trap of people-pleasing, the price of being harmless, and the kind of quiet rebellion that begins the moment you stop asking for permission to exist. If you've ever wondered why the more you give, the less you're seen, stay with me. It's time to rethink what it truly means to be good. Part 1. The Stoic Cost of Being Good. Have you ever stopped to question what the world truly respects? Look around, not at what people say, but at what they reward. Who are the ones with power, influence, and a voice? Is it the most honest, generous, and compassionate? Or is it the most composed, the clearest in their boundaries, and the least susceptible to being manipulated? The truth is difficult to accept. Goodness alone does not command respect. In fact, blind kindness, when disconnected from strength, often leads to your quiet dismissal. You can spend years being loyal, helpful, always available, but the moment your presence no longer serves the interests of others, you're not only overlooked, you're erased. No outcry, no apology, just replaced. The Stoics understood this long before it became a bitter modern reality. Marcus Aurelius, as emperor and philosopher, lived with both a compassionate heart and a disciplined hand. He didn't confuse virtue with submission. He knew that virtue without discernment becomes a weight others can exploit. Seneca warned us of this too, that one must never lose oneself in the service of others, for that is not humility, but self-betrayal. When you constantly try to be good, to be agreeable, to avoid friction, to always say yes, you unknowingly tell the world, you can ignore me. I pose no consequence. But where there is no weight, there is no respect. You are not seen as a person, but as a convenience, not as a presence, but as a resource. Why are those who set boundaries more respected than those who never say no? Why do those who speak plainly command more space than those who seek constant approval? Because they don't hand over their dignity for acceptance. They don't beg to be seen. They choose to be visible through clarity, through principle, through presence. The Stoic way is not about being feared, but about being immovable in your values. That is where true respect begins, not in loudness or aggression, but in the quiet certainty that you cannot be moved by flattery, nor destroyed by rejection. Machiavelli once wrote that if a leader must choose between being loved and feared, he should choose fear. But what the Stoics would offer instead is this: choose respect born from inner firmness. Choose to be someone who can act when needed, who carries a subtle consequence, not out of threat, but out of integrity. That kind of presence doesn't need to shout. It simply refuses to be ignored. So ask yourself, what is it within you that keeps reaching for external approval? What longing makes you soften your voice, suppress your truth, betray your own time and peace? Often, what we call kindness is not strength. It's an attempt to avoid discomfort, to flee conflict, to be accepted at all costs. But the Stoics would tell you, a peace earned by self-erasure is no peace at all. And that is exactly what we will examine next, where this compulsive need to be liked comes from, and how reclaiming your self-respect may begin by standing still, saying less, and letting silence do the work. Part 2. The Stoic Origin of Pleasing Others. No one is born desperate for approval. That impulse, the constant need to please, to be agreeable, to be seen as good, was not your nature. It was your training. From the earliest days of your life, the world began shaping you, not through wisdom, but through correction. You were taught that to be accepted, you had to conform. Don't do that, it's not nice. Be polite. Don't speak like that, you'll upset them. Over time, you internalized a silent lesson. To be loved, you must not disturb others. So you began to hide your sharp edges. You tucked away your voice. You exchanged honesty for harmony. And each time you did, a part of your will, your prohairesis, as the Stoics called it, was handed over. What started as a strategy for survival slowly became a habit of self-erasure. Today, you might call it empathy, humility, or kindness. But look closer. When you say yes, even when your soul says no, when you hold in your frustration until it poisons your silence, what virtue is that? The Stoics would call it weak assent, a collapse of your inner clarity. It is not kindness when it costs you your truth. It is not virtue when it demands your obedience to fear. Take the story of Elias, a man known for his gentleness. At work, he always stepped in to help. In his family, he never raised his voice. Friends admired his calm, his patience. But inside, Elias was tired. He'd agreed to things he didn't believe in. He'd ignored disrespect to keep the peace. One evening, after being overlooked for a promotion, again, he didn't even feel anger. He felt nothing. That's when he realized he hadn't just silenced his pain, he had silenced himself. This is what happens when you confuse acceptance with worth. You begin to believe that being agreeable will keep you safe. But safety built on silence is a cage. Seneca warned us, "He who always agrees with the crowd, even in good times, is already preparing his downfall." The fear of being disliked is not Stoic humility, it is slavery to perception. It places the judgment of others above your own reason, your logos, and it tears apart your integrity. Ask yourself, why does saying no make you feel guilty? Why does expressing disapproval feel like a betrayal? Why do you equate self-respect with selfishness? The Stoics would tell you, because you've lost your center. You've confused virtue with performance. And this performance is exhausting because it has no end. Today, they like you. Tomorrow, they don't. And all the while, your true self withers in the shadows. This mask of goodness, polished, agreeable, silent, was never yours to wear. It was stitched from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of exclusion, fear of not being enough. But fear is not a Stoic teacher. It distorts perception, leads to false choices, and robs you of ataraxia, the inner peace born of living in alignment with your own reasoned choice. True virtue doesn't bend for approval. It stands firm. Marcus Aurelius never asked to be loved. He asked to be just. Epictetus didn't beg others to understand him. He focused on understanding himself. This is your task too, to reclaim your mind, your values, your voice. The world may misunderstand your boundaries. Let them. The cost of pleasing everyone is the permanent sacrifice of yourself. There is a better way. And to find it, we must study not only the Stoics, but also those like Machiavelli, who understood that appearance is a currency, but one that must be governed, not worshipped. In the next part, we'll learn what the prince can teach us about escaping the trap of being seen as good and instead being respected as someone who acts with clarity, presence, and unapologetic strength. Part 3. The Stoic Strength Behind the Illusion of Goodness. If you're still walking through life believing that your moral integrity will automatically be recognized and rewarded, pause. The Stoics never promised that the world would honor your virtue. They taught instead that the wise man must carry both virtue and vigilance, for the world often admires appearance over essence. Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher-emperor who ruled with both compassion and steel, wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But he never said that being good would earn you protection. In fact, he knew well that those who appear weak, even if just, are often treated as weak. You may act with fairness, you may live with honesty, but if your presence doesn't carry weight, if you're easy to ignore, you will be ignored. Epictetus sharpened the point further. He taught that it is not enough to possess inner virtue. You must also know how to carry yourself in a world that doesn't see hearts, only shadows. You are a role, he said, and your job is to play it with excellence. But remember, not everyone in the audience is watching with admiration. What people perceive, they often believe. And if what they perceive is softness without structure, you will be used. Seneca, writing from within the brutal court of Nero, said it bluntly, "He who always acts like a good man among those who are not, prepares his own ruin." The Stoic does not abandon virtue, but he does not wear it like a costume. He uses it like a sword, sharp, balanced and silent, unless required. In the real world, kindness alone is not strategy. That's why Marcus warned that the best revenge is to be unlike him who did the injury. Not because you retreat, but because you rise. Because your strength lies not in retaliation, but in commanding presence and boundary. A true Stoic must be as perceptive as a philosopher and as composed as a warrior. The Stoics never promoted naivety. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire plagued with betrayal and war. Epictetus was once a slave who endured cruelty with unshakable poise. Seneca navigated one of the most treacherous political courts in history. Not one of them mistook morality for weakness. They knew that in a world full of those who scheme, you must be prepared, not paranoid, but precise. Seneca once said, "You must live among the wicked, but live like yourself." This is the middle path. It does not ask you to become cold. It demands that you become clear, that you stop expecting life to reward you simply for your goodness, and start living as someone who understands the nature of others, but refuses to betray his own. This is not cruelty, it is wisdom. To walk the Stoic path is not to avoid being harmed. It is to become someone who cannot be manipulated by the fear of harm, someone who can see through flattery, silence manipulation with presence, and respond to injustice not with weakness, but with measured power. So, no, you don't have to become ruthless, but you do have to stop being blind. And maybe now you wonder, how do I walk that line? How do I avoid becoming bitter or hardened while also refusing to be taken advantage of? That is the next truth we'll face together. There is a way between the extremes of submission and aggression, and it begins the moment you stop apologizing for having a spine. Part 4. The Stoic line between virtue and voluntary slavery. There's a fatal confusion that silently ruins the lives of many. The belief that to be good, one must be agreeable to everything. That real virtue is measured by how much injustice you can silently swallow, how many times you can forgive without reflection, and how easily you can erase yourself in the name of keeping the peace. But let's be clear, that is not kindness. It is naivety. It is weakness cloaked in the language of virtue. And if you don't learn to recognize the difference, you will remain the world's emotional servant, useful, agreeable, disposable. True Stoic kindness does not demand your disappearance. It demands clarity. It requires prohairesis, your rational faculty that governs choice. To be good does not mean you must be a smiling shadow, always nodding, always self-sacrificing for people who would never lift a hand for you in return. That is not virtue. That is self-betrayal, a dangerous abandonment of your own reason and dignity. Seneca once warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And what is constant self-erasure, if not a life lived avoiding friction, never drawing lines, never allowing your values to meet resistance? Take the example of Maria, a teacher known for her warmth. She stayed after hours, answered emails at midnight, covered for absent colleagues. She was the good one. But over time, her silence became expectation. When she finally refused a last-minute request, she was met not with gratitude, but with disappointment. Not because she had changed, but because she had trained others to see her goodness as unlimited compliance. Her integrity was mistaken for availability, her virtue for servitude. That's the tragedy of naive goodness. It lives expecting the world to reflect its own heart. It assumes fairness will be returned, that kindness will be matched, that sacrifice will be seen. But what happens instead? Disillusionment, quiet bitterness, resentment you never voice. Because naive goodness projects nobility onto others who have not earned it. It is the internal war between what you give and what is never reciprocated. The Stoics teach us a sharper way. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would lie, cheat, disappoint, but he must remain true to his nature. Yet nowhere did he say he must endure abuse. Nowhere did Epictetus suggest that virtue requires silence in the face of disrespect. On the contrary, he said, you must stop attaching value to what lies outside your control, and people's approval, their praise, their opinion of your goodness, all beyond your command. True Stoic kindness is firm. It sets boundaries. It says no. It walks away. It understands that not all deserve your best, and that giving your best to those who deplete you is not generosity. It is mismanagement of your soul. Yes, you can be just, compassionate, and deeply rooted in principle, and still be respected, still be feared, still be someone others think twice before crossing, because strength, when paired with compassion, becomes presence. It becomes influence. Remember, the Stoics never encouraged cruelty, but they despised self-delusion. And nothing is more delusional than believing that virtue requires you to accept mistreatment in silence. The question you must ask yourself now is brutally simple. Is your kindness protecting your dignity or exposing your vulnerability? Is it rooted in strength or in the fear of being rejected if you ever draw a line? Because if your version of goodness means accepting crumbs, hiding your anger, justifying others' disrespect while silencing your own needs, then you are not being good. You are being dominated, and domination has no place in a Stoic life. But there is another way. There is a place where you don't have to abandon your values, nor bend your spine for anyone. A place where courage meets compassion, where you speak clearly, not loudly, where you can love, but never beg, help, but never be used, forgive, but not forget. In the next part, we'll walk this middle path together. We'll talk about how to stop being nice without becoming hardened, and how to reclaim your space in the world, calmly, deliberately, and without betraying your soul. Because your life doesn't need more politeness. It needs more power, anchored in virtue. And this is where it begins. Part 5. The Stoic Path to Inner Strength. Many who awaken to the truth of their own compliance fall into a subtle trap. After years of saying yes when they meant no, of allowing their peace to be eroded for the sake of others, they decide, never again. But what follows isn't always strength. It's the opposite mask. They become rigid, cold, withdrawn. They believe that to escape being too nice, they must become unfeeling. This is what the Stoics would call a reaction born from imbalance, not wisdom. It is not transformation, it is overcorrection. And like all extremes, it is a form of captivity. Because when you abandon your nature in the name of survival, you're not stepping into power. You're shielding yourself with avoidance. That's not freedom. That's fear in disguise. True liberation comes not by becoming the opposite of who you were, but by returning to your center. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is a slave to his reactions. Freedom is acting from choice, not from wounded reflex. It is when you stop performing virtue for the crowd and start living with alignment, not apology." So how do you stop being nice without betraying your essence? First, reclaim your voice. You may have been taught that speaking up, setting limits, or disagreeing makes you selfish. But selfishness is not asserting yourself. Selfishness is demanding that someone else stay small to keep you comfortable. The Stoic understands that speaking truth without cruelty is not arrogance, it is dignity. When you say, "I do not accept this," you are not causing harm. You are honoring your reasoned judgment, your proheresis, which is the heart of Stoic strength. Second, learn the art of refusal. No is not a wall, it is a declaration of value. It doesn't need to be shouted or justified. A quiet, unwavering no, spoken from clarity, carries more power than 1,000 explanations. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. That applies just as much to your boundaries as it does to your behavior. Those who never learn to say no will always be governed by those who never ask for permission. Third, notice who resists your transformation. When you begin to shift, when you stop making yourself smaller, there will be those who react. They'll call you difficult, changed, selfish. But as Epictetus would say, it's not what they say, it's how you respond that matters. These are not signs of failure. They are evidence that you are breaking the quiet contract that allowed others to benefit from your silence. Growth, to those who depended on your compliance, feels like betrayal. Don't mistake their discomfort for your mistake. Take the example of Lena, a friend who always said yes. She was the dependable one, the helper, the listener, the one who never asked for anything in return. But when Lena began carving out space for herself, declining events, expressing disagreement, prioritizing rest, one of her closest friends said, "You've changed." And she had. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't cold, she was finally aligned. And for the first time, she respected herself more than the version of her others preferred. Fourth, stop seeking universal understanding. Not everyone will understand your evolution. They're not meant to. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. Your task is not to keep up appearances. It is to maintain alignment. You owe no loyalty to the version of you that kept others comfortable. Your loyalty is to the self that stands upright, even when misunderstood. Fifth, replace the desire to be accepted with a commitment to authenticity. When you act from truth rather than people-pleasing, you might unsettle some, but you will inspire others. More importantly, you will respect yourself, and self-respect is the only kind of respect no one can revoke. This journey doesn't require you to become harsh. It requires you to become whole. Seneca never asked us to be feared. He asked us to be firm. And Marcus Aurelius never asked us to please. He asked us to live in accordance with our highest reasoning. Now comes the turning point. The choice between continuing to dilute yourself in the name of being nice or finally stepping into the kind of presence that neither demands attention nor begs for approval. Because what's at stake is not just how others see you, it's whether you'll live your one brief life ruled by others' expectations or ruled by your own inner clarity. Part 6. The Stoic Decision to Reclaim Yourself. Let's stop pretending. How long will you keep wearing the mask of the good one, soft-spoken, ever-available, endlessly agreeable? How long will you trade your time, your voice, your dignity, just to uphold an image that was never truly yours, but one the world conveniently expects of you? This is not virtue. It is not nobility. It is captivity. A silent imprisonment decorated with polite praise for being predictable, for not being a threat, for being easy to ignore. But here's the truth no one dares to say. No one is coming to free you. No one will suddenly reward your silence. No one will hand you back the years you gave away trying to please. Because as long as you make yourself useful to others at the expense of yourself, someone will always be ready to use you. That's not cruelty. That's the nature of the world. And as the Stoics remind us, nature does not adjust to your good intentions. It responds to your actions. You can continue playing the role society wrote for you. Calm, selfless, understanding, endlessly tolerant, but prepare to be overlooked. To feel resentment quietly erode your days. To vanish inside the very kindness you thought would protect you. Or you can wake up. You can decide that your generosity will no longer be automatic, that it will be offered, not extracted, that your kindness will flow from strength, not fear, that you will no longer seek approval like a beggar at the door of validation, because freedom, the kind the Stoics spoke of, is not found in pleasing others. It's found in self-respect. And the moment you stop asking for permission to exist is the moment you finally become untouchable. If this message stirred something in you, don't just walk away. Subscribe and stay with us. There's more truth ahead.